this week's brutal episode of Berserk, Guts has a blood-soaked battle with Father Mozgus, who is transformed into a massive armored monster, hell-bent on destroying the Black Swordsman. The best way to enjoy this week's episode of Berserk, in my humble opinion, is to find your favorite metal album and play it while you watch this episode. I was listening to Slayer while watching some of the action scenes this week, and I have to say, it really enhanced the awesomeness of this week's episode, which was, without a doubt, the best episode of Berserk thus far. And how can you top it? It's Guts versus an apostle, Mozgus, who is transformed into this massive, scaly, armored creature, which just looks so freaking awesome in this anime version. Not to mention, there is a lot of amazing teasing going on in this episode. Hell, hardcore Berserk fans are going to love the beginning of the episode as we get to see the return of Zod, the Immortal. It's almost as if history is repeating itself. Massive sacrifices, the God Hand appearing, Zod the Immortal showing up acting like a badass, the Skull Knight, Casca about to be burned alive, and of course Guts doing what he does best: killing demons with style. While Guts is certainly the star of this week's episode, I have to give some credit to Isidro for actually using physics. He actually saved Casca through the use of a pulley system in a really clever way where he tied himself off, which is seeming to be sort of like his shtick. He just seems to love running over the top of mountainsides or off the top of a tower, and they actually end up saving Casca. And this is all really funny, because you have that one knight by the name of Jerome who is trying to cover his own ass because he doesn't want to get caught by the fact that he's trying to help out these people. He'll be seen as a heretic, and we know that the Holy Iron Chain Knights have no problems with burning people at the stake, so honestly, if I were Jerome, I would be pissing my pantaloons as well. The rest of the episode, however, is just Guts versus Mozgus, and man, does it look freaking awesome. I especially love how the battle starts out with Guts being at the very top of the tower as he's plowing through all of this demonic energy with his sword, covered in all of that red, nasty energy, and then he just slams right into Mozgus and flies down the side of this tower, crashing into the wall, when suddenly Mozgus transforms into his form, which looks really awesome, very reminiscent of his angel form before, except that the scales, or the feathers, have like a completely different look to them. They're very armored, they're very black, and they just make him look awesome. He looks like a massive stone creature with angel wings, and I love the fact that he just doesn't give just like a big power boost. He can actually utilize a number of cool abilities. The first one, of course, being the fact that each of his individual wings can actually curl up and transform into fists, which he can use to punch Guts from multiple angles. It's incredibly impactful when they're hitting Guts, the fact that he's actually managing to dodge and actually block most of these attacks with his sword, but it also kind of reminds me of Luffy from One Piece, the way he does his big Gatling punches. Just sort of combine that with Berserk, and that's what you get in this week's episode. That and the fact that it is kind of ridiculous that Guts actually wasn't able to finish off Mozgus in the beginning of the battle, because he does stab him with his sword before his transformation, but apparently the sword was blocked by Mozgus's Bible, which is apparently as thick as a ram skull. He places that right above his chest, which is basically a big symbol of his faith, and this actually ends up being the thing that defeats him eventually. But we still get a number of really great scenes from Guts and Mozgus. You also have the twins who are continuously flying around and trying to saw people to death, including the character of Nina, who falls over the side of the tower and of course survives. Can't they just kill off Nina already? Damn, she's freaking annoying. And then you have Isidro and Puck, who actually managed to take out the twins with a little bit of help from Jerome. The scene is hilarious, especially with Puck, who uses some sort of like big solar flare type technique where he flies up into the air, blinds them, and this gives Isidro the chance to actually throw rocks right into their face. Pretty much that's all Isidro does, which is run down mountain cliffs and throw rocks in people's faces. Going back to Guts and Mozgus for a second, I love the scene where Mozgus is about to try and burn Guts with his god's breath, but Guts actually takes his sword, shoves it right into Mozgus's mouth, which actually deflects the fire, hitting the twins, by the way. He then continues to just hit him with these flurry of huge attacks, and as he's slowly getting defeated, he actually gets real close to him, and it looks like he just barely touches his chest. What Guts is actually doing is he's taking taking a couple of those explosive bombs, placing them in the Bible that's in Mozgus' chest, which then explodes! And that's when we get what I've been waiting for, which is just a lot of epic Guts sword swinging. He always manages to make it look really awesome. The way he has to use his entire body just to swing his sword. He hits Mozgus multiple times and then finally defeats him by stabbing him right through the neck, going through the Bible, and completely turning him into this fiery blaze, which he then picks up by himself and throws him over the edge of this tower, sending him to the bottom, exploding into fire and feathers. Ugh, that was awesome! However, Guts and his friends are not out of the woods yet. There's still a ceremony that's getting ready to take place, and all of the people who are around the tower are slowly being devoured by this massive demonic energy. And then, of course, you have the egg-shaped apostle, which has actually swallowed that one baby demon. And it looks like it's getting ready to perform another big ceremony, which is all going to come to fruition in the next episode. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Berserk? It sucks major demon balls. That next week's episode is going to be the last one of the season, especially because things are finally starting to pick up and get really exciting. And this episode right here was an action-packed thrill fest to be seen. Basically, it was just an excuse to watch Guts doing what he does best, which is fucking up demons, and they did a great job of that in this episode. I'll even excuse the CG, as it actually adds this, like, creepiness to Mozgus' form. It just makes him seem so massive and imposing, and he really was in this episode. There's a lot of little animation details in this episode I love a lot as well, like when he's actually talking to the crowd of people who are begging to help. He actually puts his hand out, and then his wing extends and starts to unfurl. It's little moments like that which add a lot of character to him as well. Then, of course, there's a lot of the big things going on in this episode, like the whole egg eating the baby thing. This is a really crazy scene. It's going to lead to one of the biggest events in the Berserk series. For those who don't read the manga, I don't want to spoil it. All I'm going to say is you definitely don't want to miss next week's episode. I also like a few little small character moments, like the egg-shaped apostle actually thinking, if I'd have actually met Father Mozgus, my life could have changed. I could have become one of his followers and a torturer, just like all of these other people. Alas, I was never found and I was left alone, and I transformed into the freaky-deaky thing that you see today. It's weird to see an apostle with thoughts like this. He's definitely one of the more sympathetic apostles that you'll see from the entire series. A very sad story. And come on, Skull Knight and Zod at the beginning of this episode. Zod the Immortal is one of the craziest characters from the Berserk series. Fans of the original anime or the movie trilogy will definitely know who this character is, and he's basically the ultimate rival of the Skull Knight and just one of the coolest looking characters in the entire series, and one of the most unique apostles, because unlike a lot of the other ones, he kind of looks a little more like a traditional mythical beast. Like, when he fully transforms, he basically looks kind of like this giant, like, lion chimera creature, like with massive wings and huge freaking horns, while as the other apostles always tend to look like these weird, bald, musculature, nasty, almost phallic-looking creatures. So he's very distinctive when compared to a lot of the other apostles from the series, and I love seeing him in action, and him just appearing in this episode, not even having any dialogue, is awesome. He just carries so much presence with him. He's definitely a fan-favorite Berserk character, and I loved seeing his inclusion in this episode, despite the fact that it's essentially just a teaser. Really, this episode is going to be defined by Guts versus Mozgus. Does it live up to the hype? Honestly, I think so. I think it did the manga justice. I never imagined it looking like this in the anime version. I never even really thought about the fact that it was nighttime in the manga because it's black and white. Even though we know it is all taking place at night, it just has a different look about it. The atmosphere really added a lot to the battle in this episode, and frankly, it was just exciting on all fronts. The action, the freaking music, whenever that metal music kicks in with Guts getting ready to defeat him, man, was that satisfying as hell. And that's really the best way to describe this week's episode of Berserk. It was just a big, awesome, badass, satisfying action episode, and you should definitely check it out if you're a fan of the Berserk series. We need to soak this up and drink it up as much as we can because it's almost over. There's a small possibility we might not get any more Berserk anime in the future. This could very well be the end of it, and they're almost certainly going to leave on a cliffhanger, which is basically going to be telling the audience for the third time, go read the manga version. We can only hope for more in the future, and that's what I'm hoping for. I will say that I loved this episode right here. Not only the action, but just that tender moment between Guts and Casca reuniting. Despite the fact that Casca is like freaking out and doesn't really realize what's going on, it doesn't matter. Just, this is the first true reunion that we've seen between these characters since the other anime versions of the series. Of course, it's a little different in the manga version, but this is the anime version of Berserk. And you know what? It's a pretty damn decent adaptation that all Berserk fans should definitely check out. 5 out of 5 this week. Make sure to tell me what you guys thought about this week's episode of Berserk in the comments section below. What did you think of the battle between Guts and Mozgus? Did it live up to the hype? Did you have a favorite scene from this episode? What did you think about seeing the return of Zod the Immortal? And what do you want to see from the final episode of this season of Berserk? Please tell me in the comments section below. Thank you guys so much. You are awesome. One of the best ways to support my YouTube channel is to continue doing what you're doing right now, which is to watch our videos. But another great way, of course, is to subscribe, to hit that like button, and to check out our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast, as well as all of our cool social media stuff. You'll find that all in the description box below. Thank you guys again for watching. And as always, stay dandy, baby!